Hi, I'm Edric,
I'm Joy.
and we're here to help you.
Get it right from the start.
All right. So if you followed the first podcast, this is a part two. And, we're doing this because we love our son so much. And as I was listening to him and as I'm opening up to you guys right now, it's weird to feel like I am now being taught and learning from my own son. I think it's a very good season for us to realize that after all the years of grit and putting in the time to help guide him, it is refreshing to see that literally I am now learning from my son. And so we were going to keep the learning journey going, son. And I think now we're going to talk a little bit more about, we're going to talk about internal motivation, right? And
I know you're fasting, so your brain is like a...
Thanks for that commercial break and just a backgrounder. But what I've observed as a father who came from a completely different environment from you, right? I came from an environment where I was brought up with a different faith background. I was brought up with a different education background, right? And even just the economics surrounding both our lifestyles or our growing stages were very different. So on the one hand, as I've observed this, I realized that in the space we are in, your mom and I, and the one of the defining moments we made as a family to homeschool, what really stood out to me when I chose to do this, because when you were a 3-4-year-old boy, mom and I had a debate, right? Should we homeschool or not? Because a lot of the pressure around me was keep the conventional school going, right? And I'll never forget, one of the things that tipped it for me was when a professor from the school that I came from was talking about your Auntie Carolyn, who's Joy's sister, who graduated summa cum laude, did very well for herself in that school, and was the co-captain of the first ever women's UAAP champion team. So that's pretty good for a homeschooler to be able to show that they can do that. So anyway, she said something I'll never forget. She's a psychology professor. She said Carolyn stood out because as opposed to many of the students, in fact, maybe all of the students she's experienced, what made her different is she was internally motivated. You see, many of the students she taught would want to be able to push themselves, compare themselves to others, and that's what would help them achieve something in school at that level. But she was different because that was driving her. It was not fazed by what other people were doing. She just kept pushing herself to do what she did. And as I mentioned, she did quite well for herself. So I'm setting that up because this topic and this internal motivation is something that shaped or helped me decide to say, let's do this, baby. Let's homeschool our baby, who's obviously not a baby right now. So let's get into the conversation. Having set that up, I know you have some questions set up for Elijah. Go for it, baby. Ask the questions about internal motivation.
Oh, yeah, because as opposed to our other children, Elijah is no longer living with us most of the time. And so, we don't check on him every single day, every single moment. Not that we're helicopter parents, but it's a different dynamic, as we shared previously.
And Elijah, for the record, was homeschooled all the way through. So it's like he's done the homeschool, he's done the college circuit, and again, by God's grace, he's done well, right? So...
Well, he's not done with college yet. He's gonna be done.
We'll see. We're both laughing because maybe we'll see. But yeah, go ahead, babe.
But I think one of the questions I have for you, Elijah, is... I don't think I've gotten to ask you this too, so I'm actually really curious about what you're going to say.
So am I.
How have you kept up the internal motivation to be excellent, to work hard, even when nobody's watching you? And I say watching in quotation marks, because obviously God is always watching, but in the sense of having parents tell you, Elijah, you should do this, you should do that. So where does that come from, and how did that develop in you?
And maybe you can add, well, did dad and mom actually do that? Elijah, you should do this. How involved were we in pushing you? Go.
Sweetheart, just let him answer first.
Okay.
You're so funny. Okay.
The Asian stereotype of parents always hovering over you, watching you. The joke is you're an Asian, not a Bijan.
Meaning you always should get A's and not B's.
I love that. I love that.
One of my friends at school asked me, why do you try so hard for your school? I'm like, I'm an Asian, not a Asian. No, but that's just a joke. I've wondered this too a little bit. How motivation works and how you develop deeper desires and convictions and stick to them. Because I've seen some of my friends grow up as well, and their paths are starting to diverge in different directions. And part of it goes to show how their desires have changed and their desires have driven their paths every which way. And I do want to qualify this by saying I don't think I'm the most internally motivated person there is. I have a roommate who is a black belt in Taekwondo and does Muay Thai and also does Jiu-Jitsu. And I have another roommate who's like a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. And I've tried fighting at least one of them. And it is like, these guys are on a different level. So in terms of internal motivation, I don't feel like I'm very high up there on the pecking order at all. But what little things I have learned is that motivation, for it to stick, has to become so deeply ingrained in the heart that it can weather the inevitable shifts of peer pressure that will come into anyone's life. Homeschooling is good because it has allowed me to develop, has allowed the seeds of motivation to sink in to the point where they're deeper. I think the goal is, just like the verse says, to have the words, in the case of the Bible, God's words etched upon your heart. Something, a word that is in a place that is fixed, immovable, that's not going to change, becomes part of the desires. And really that goes ultimately back to who is your Lord, who is your Savior, because only He is able to keep you from stumbling. Without that, even the most hardcore of motivations can begin to fade or can disappoint you, because it goes back to why you do what you do. There's that book, Start With Why. There's so many people who have gone to what is the root of what you do. And I think that's what drives motivation. Why you do what you do will determine what you like to do. And what you like to do will determine what you're motivated to do. And what you're motivated to do will determine what you accomplish. And so I guess that's a pretty high level overview of what kind of happened in my life. Not that it is even very good by any means, but it has been some.
I'm just going to interrupt you here, okay? Because I think you and I, hun, we both know that Elijah tends to be very hard on himself.
Oh, not just very,
And
extremely hard.
I will not say this because by God's grace, you really want to be humble. But you have maintained a 4.0 for the last 3 years.
We haven't checked our grades yet for this semester.
Yes, but I'm saying, Elijah,
As of this recording.
yes, but when you downplay the fact that you have actually worked really hard and you've maintained a 4.0 average at a school that is so rigorous, like I just want to put that out there so it doesn't seem like you're talking about motivation, but you don't know what you're talking about because you haven't actually been motivated to do well because you're doing well.
Right. And in fact, I'll add this here because he won't say this about himself. Again, by the grace of God. So there's a dean's list and there's a president's list. And because of that, he's been on that president's list as a result. So just adding to what you
And I know
are
you're going
saying.
to be upset with me for saying this. I can see your face already. But I just wanted to say that so that as you talk about motivation, I want people to understand where that comes from. Because honestly, mom and dad did not tell you to maintain a 4.0. I don't know about your dad.
I see his face before me.
No, I have not said it for the record, right? I've not said that you must be. Just be. Tell everybody here for the record and don't be sarcastic. How did I ever say, Elijah, you must get a 4.0?
For the record, Dad has never told me.
Wait, have I ever told you that?
No.
In fact, what if I told you?
I mean, if anything, is like it'd be cool, if I could show my parents that I did get good grades. But that's not. I don't think that's the main reason.
Exactly. So I want you to tell them what your main reason is. That's what I'm trying to ask you. This very specific question.
I think he touched on it, but let's hear it, go, Elijah.
No, he's explaining the philosophy and the theology behind
which I connected. I was able, but let's hear it, Elijah, for mom's sake. Go.
Elijah, tell me, why do you push yourself so hard?
Well, simple reasons. I'm competitive. My dad's always instilled that in me.
That is from your father. Okay.
I want to do well in things that I can do well in. And I was like, let's just see where this goes. When I came in, I had no idea how I'd perform on grading because mom had given me grades all my life. I didn't trust them. So I said, I said, you know what? I might completely fail these classes. I don't know. What is this grade? This number? I don't even know what this number means. Is this good or is this bad? I asked my professor, can you give me a higher grade? He was like, no, I cannot. I would not give Shakespeare a higher grade. I was like, that's not logical. Like, anyway, so there's that. There's a desire to produce excellent work and to be satisfied with the fruit of my labor. I think that goes back to the verse in the Bible that my dad would just repeat to us almost ad nauseum growing up.
So what is
whatever
ad
your
nauseum?
hand finds to do?
What is ad nauseum for everyone who's listening?
Whatever. Oh, ad nauseum, like until you are nauseated.
Good. Just for people like me who need to understand that. Again, I was not homeschooled, so Anyway,
Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. That's in Ecclesiastes. And so I have this. What else am I going to be doing with my time? I don't have distractions. Well, when I first started in college, I didn't have friends to distract me. I didn't have family to distract me. I resolved to not really use my digital devices for anything that I found fun, like coding. So all I did was study, and I put all my time into it. And then since then, I've learned how to like taper off and balance my time between different
And
things.
have a social life.
But that's kind of where that goes. Whatever my hand finds to do, I've got to do it with all my might. I've got to put my 100% into it. And I think the last thing is kind of what you do with like academics and that kind of thing. What I try to do, what my prayer has been, and I'm not perfect at this by any means, but what I try to do is before every test, I pray, Lord, I commit this to you. The outcome is yours. And may I use this and be contented with it so that I glorify you with what the outcome is. And if I get a good grade, praise God. If I didn't do well, thank you, Lord, for the lesson and how I can get better next time. But that I think is the deepest, the core thing. And it's been something it's not just a fantasy, it's been real because I've seen it lived out in some people's lives, people that I'm very, very close to, people that I've been able to watch as I was in my formative years, watching them up close and see their blemishes up close, but also
You're
see
talking about your parents, right?
that
wait, he's leading towards it. Don't interrupt.
Also
him. Keep him going. Keep him going.
When he said blemishes, I know that's us.
I know. I was like, ding, ding, ding.
but also see that there was a deep sincerity and a love for God that drove that. And those people were my parents. That's what homeschooling has allowed me to do. It's allowed me to see that up close. And it's allowed me to realize, you know what? It's not fake. It's real. And that's why it's so important to be consistent as parents, and where, you might fall short. To what I've seen my parents do in the moments when they have fallen short is be honest about it to us, because that shows a rebellion against the hypocrisy that is pervading the church and that kills the next second and third generation of believers that come from the church and from families that have good intentions but are trying to maintain an outward appearance that is not glorifying to God, because the inward heart, which God looks at, is not there. And that's almost counterintuitive to look at motivation and say, okay, how do you have motivation? Don't be hypocritical. But on the other hand, it's just a consistent life. It's a consistent life through and through that'll allow you to stay consistent through even past the shelter of a home.
Oh, thanks, Elijah. Now, for those who were not able to see this on the video episode, of course, Joy was getting teary-eyed, and we had a quick moment there. I'd love to put our caption to that. What were you thinking or feeling?
Wait. I'm really hungry right now, actually, because I've been fasting for several days. But I think what I was thinking was, I guess how gracious God is, because we've not been perfect in our parenting and we've made mistakes for sure. But there's something about making God the center of your marriage, your home, and living for God that impacts not only your marriage and your relationship as husband and wife, but your parenting, and somehow by God's grace impacts your children. So I'm saying that if that motivation is there, even for you and me, right? Like in our parenting, I think we've always just wanted to make sure that our children, not make sure, because you can't absolutely make sure, but live in such a way that we inspire our children to love God and know God and really seek after God. And because at the end of the day, we know that the choices our children are going to make, they really aren't for us and for our glory. We want them to do well. We want Elijah, Eden, Titus, Tiana, Catalina, Kaylee to succeed because we want them to glorify God. And when I'm listening to Elijah now, and when he's communicating that he saw that and somehow that's carried him through, that's exactly what I wanted. That's exactly what we homeschooled for, is that we want our children to develop the internal motivation to want to be excellent, to want to do their best, not because people are watching them, not because somebody is going to applaud them someday and say, "You're so excellent, you're so amazing," but because we want them to do these things so that they can glorify God. It's like that passage in Matthew where it says, "Let your light shine before men in such a way
My favorite one now.
that they will honor, that they will glorify
Your good
you.
deeds, yeah.
They will see your good deeds,
glorify
your
Father in
Father
heaven.
in heaven."
Matthew 5:16. Yeah.
So the motivation is I want to do well. There has to be like some kind of external output and evidence that I'm really trying hard. But the reason why I'm trying hard is because at the end of the day, I want people to see God in me and I want them to be attracted to God and I want them to look to God. So
Yeah.
That's why you were getting emotional. I wanted to add to that and say, I too, if you saw, got a little bit emotional because I think what helps on the topic of motivation is to see that it is working. Does that make sense?
yeah,
So
Totally.
the difference
Because-
with this interview, with all the other interviews, is that we've literally put our heart and soul, heart, mind, and strength behind raising our children with that core motivation. And so to see that it is real for them and is not forced or coerced, again, in spite of our imperfections, it is really refreshing for me. So it helps me to say, carry on. And that's, again, my encouragement to you, honey, as you're sharing this.
Yeah.
You've got Kaylee, who's 6 years old, right? And we've got Catalina, 11, and Tiana. So part of the reminder for us is, by God's grace, we're seeing some of the fruit now, but we've got to carry on. The job is not done. So you want to say something, I think. Go ahead, Elijah.
Yeah. One more thing that I was reflecting on additionally as mom and dad were speaking is really that it all goes back to the grace of God and what it means to live a grace-filled life as a parent. Because when you realize that it is not really ultimately you who is going to be able to keep yourself from stumbling or from being imperfect or from, never throwing tantrums, so your kids never throw tantrums. It is the grace of God that allows you to pick back up and to even see the fruit of your labor and the rewards for your actions. Without that grace, we all are lost. I've seen the friends that I talked about who have very, very good internal motivation. It wasn't always perfect parents that got them there. Sometimes it was just one parent who was faithful, just a mom or just a dad, or even a coach in their life that showed them what it meant to have grit, what it meant to have internal motivation, and why they stuck to it for so long, because those words became the words on their hearts. And then I think the final thing is when parents are able to get out of the way of the relationship between their kids and God, when the kids can finally have a relationship with the true parent, the true father, who will never err, who will be perfectly consistent, then his words can become implanted on their hearts. That his words can be etched on their hearts and carry them forward, regardless of how their parents may be imperfect or not.
Well, I want to say preach on, son. It's exactly what I'm saying. I'm learning from him. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really good stuff. I can use that. Now, thank you, son, for being honest. Any closing words from you, babe, on this episode?
Yeah, I think one of my encouragements is really to parents, to moms. We are we are so engrossed in the day to day, and sometimes it can be overwhelming, and you don't always see the fruit right away. But I think that this, what Elijah's talking about being internally motivated, is something that we all need to have in our parenting. That we need to be internally motivated to wake up every single day and show up and be the moms who are Christ centered, Christ filled, and the dads, yeah, because you won't see it right away, but over time, and as your children begin to grow up and you begin to experience the fruit like that, it's so like this, like what Elijah's sharing about his own life. I didn't know what he was going to share, actually. We didn't really go over what we're going to talk about too much for this podcast because we wanted it to be spontaneous. But just seeing the fruit like that, it is so encouraging. And it's like just the encouragement that I needed from the Lord. Today, because I have so many kids, and sometimes I'm like, oh, how am I going to be able to parent them all well? And sometimes I feel like I'm failing, but it's just encouraging to know that the effort and the showing up, doesn't go to waste, because God uses it somehow. As Elijah said, at the end of the day, you realize it's really God's grace, and you parent one child at a time, and you just show up for one child at a time, and someday, Lord willing, the fruit will be there.
Right. And on that note, what I've also reminded of is how Elijah is already 21, but he's only 21. There's still so much ahead, and there is no guarantee, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that because part of what makes this really powerful is that we continue praying. And for everyone that's listening to this or even watching this, we're going to come in this with some authentic humility and saying, look, guys, we haven't figured it all out. We're still on a journey. Elijah are raising him even through this season. Well, not maybe raising him, but guiding at this season and just being journeying alongside him is that it's a journey. And I think, as Elijah said, without the grace of God and this prayer, this need for us to just keep praying. We want to ask those of you that know our family well, if you're listening to this, please keep praying for us, and we'll keep praying for you guys. Yeah. So again, I'm Edric.
I'm Joy.
And we're here to help you
Get it right from the start.